Hi, it's Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video, as much as it would be nice to praise the new Geforce 4070 Super, we're not going to do that. In fact, we're going to be talking about the graphics card, which is behind me. The good old Nvidia Geforce RTX 3060 Ti Founders Edition. What an absolute peach of a card. It's now the beginning of 2024, and the Founders Edition of the GA104 die came out, or was announced, on December the 1st, 2020. So this card is now 3 years old. But for me, it's still one of the best cards on the market. And surprisingly, if you're one of those people that stumped up the cash for around about $400 or around about £370 here in the UK for one of these when they first came out, potentially you actually did a pretty good thing. Graphics cards have shot up in price. This one still performs absolutely brilliantly, and surprisingly actually still gets some pretty decent results when it comes to selling them on the used market, with really wide range of prices, anywhere from sort of £200 up to £350, depending who, what, where and what type of card it is, and how new and how much they want to try and rinse you of some cash. So let's take a look at some of the specifications of this thing and see what it's actually all about. So we're looking at 4,864 CUDA cores, we're looking at 152 TMUs, 80 ROPs, we're looking at 8GB of GDDR6 memory, all on that lovely 256-bit bus. We've got a base clock of 410 MHz, we've got a boost clock of 1665 MHz, and quite often they would boost far past that. Also, some of the cool things about it, we're looking at a 200 watt card, a dual slot, especially for the Founders Edition, and you can get away with running this on 550 watt PSU, or at least that's what Nvidia recommend. All of this supporting DirectX 12 Ultimate, and in terms of performance wise, it fits in just slightly above. The Geforce RTX 2080 Super is around about 2% slower. On the AMD side of the fence, you're looking at the RX 6700 XT, which is about 4% faster, and even with Nvidia's own replacement for this, the 4060 Ti 8GB version, generally is somewhere between, well, 0 and 10% faster, and in some weird instances actually a little bit slower. So what I thought would be a good idea to do is take a look at some games that I play regularly, and some of them that you've requested also, and take a look at how it performs now in the beginning of 2024. So let's take a look. So first of all, just for a very quick sanity check, running 3D Mark. This is 3D Mark Timespy, and we're getting a score of 11,776 points, which is kind of about right. There is an absolute metric ton of things running in the background on this PC, and it's been used for all kinds of videos and what have you. So yeah, it's not running the best it could do. We could squeeze a little bit more out of it, and the card itself is set to all of the factory defaults with the latest Nvidia driver. So next we're going to take a look at something a little bit more esportsy, although these days it's actually taking a little bit more to run. This is the new and improved version of CSGO, or CS2. So we're looking here at an average frame rate of 238.1 frames per second, a minimum of 155.3 frames per second, a maximum of 309.4 FPS, 1% lows of 127.8 FPS, and 0.1% lows of 71.5. This is running 1440p, high settings, and basically with all the settings as a default. So if you go into CS2, set it to 1440p, set it to the high preset, this is how you get your results. The game itself plays really nicely, and actually surprisingly I did quite well on this, and it's possible to play this in 4K if you want to, just the numbers will diminish quite significantly. Personally, I think 1440p with CS2 is the ultimate for this particular card if you want those high FPS in a competitive manner. Next up, we'll take a look at Cyper Punk. Now this again is running 1440p with the high preset. This is getting an average 94.5 FPS, a minimum of 74.4 FPS, a maximum of 193.7 FPS, 1% lows of 61.2, and 0.1% lows of 11.8. Not sure what happened there, but overall a very nice experience, and playing this is very nice. Anything over 60 FPS I think 1440p high settings is more than adequate, especially for a game of this type. Next up, we've got a favourite of mine. This is Dead Island 2. Again, all of these games will be running at 1440p and with the high preset. Now, whether the game includes things like FSR or any other frame scaling, that is down to the individual game engine. I haven't tweaked anything. This is basically how it's going to run. So with this, we're looking at an average of 119.2 FPS, minimums down to 81.5, a maximum FPS of 157.3, 1% lows of 65.4, and 0.1% lows of 50.2 FPS. Overall, again, this game looks absolutely stunning, running on that Unreal Engine. Very nice, very smooth, an extremely enjoyable experience, and lots of eye candy, especially at 1440p high settings. Next, a little bit more zombie bashing. So this is the original Dying Light. This is a somewhat older game now, but still actually quite taxing to run, and it definitely was back in the day when it first came out. So if you enjoyed this when it first released and you were on slightly older hardware, with the RTX 3060 Ti, this runs really nicely, and no real bad frame drops. Even the 0.1% lows are over 60 FPS. So we've got averages of 163.2, minimums of 109.9, maximums of 240.9, 1% lows 110.1, and the 0.1% lows of 67.4 frames per second. Very nice. This game is really great. The depth and the storyline, actually, I really enjoyed it. If you haven't tried it, get it. You can pick it up really cheaply now. A very enjoyable experience, especially on this RTX 3060 Ti. Next up, we're off to Yara. This is Far Cry 6. This, again, really good game, excellent storyline, and with this card, it runs really nicely. Again, 1440p, high preset. We're getting average here of 134.9 FPS, minimums of 109.2, maximum FPS 169.0, 1% lows of 107.8, and 0.1% lows of 76.2. Again, this runs really, really nicely and is a beautiful game, as are pretty much all of the Far Cry series. Though Far Cry 2 was a bit of a weird one, but anyway. This runs really nicely, and again, if you haven't played Far Cry 6, definitely get it. It runs really well on this slightly older hardware, but still, I think it looks absolutely brilliant. Well, we had to include this one, so we're looking at Fortnite. This, again, 1440p. This is set to the high preset, and we've got RTX turned off. So here we're getting an average of 113.9 FPS, minimums of 72.4, maximum FPS 147.9, 1% lows bang on 60 FPS, and the 0.1% lows down to 28.3, which is something you expect if you're playing Fortnite. If you've done it at any point at all, you'll know that it's just one of those weird game engines where every now and then you'll get these stutters, but overall the average FPS getting close to 120, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Again, 1440p, high settings. There's a lot of eye candy in this particular game engine now. So from one extreme to another, so now we're going to be taking a look at the Microsoft Flight Simulator from 2020, ironically, when this video card actually came out. And this is doing the Toronto landing. So we're looking at averages of 73.7 FPS, minimums of 67.2, a maximum 97.6, 1% lows of 62.8, and 0.1% lows of 28.8. Again, this is one of those titles which really, as long as you're around the sort of 30 FPS mark, it's absolutely fine and you won't really notice any dips or stutters. Ideally, if you can get it up to 60 FPS, that is much better. This, again, 1440p running at the high preset, no RTX on. There is also on this, I've taken the scaling off, so this is running natively at 1440p without any scaling whatsoever. It still runs absolutely great and looks fantastic. Something different now for you esports fans out there. So this is Rocket League. Again, 1440p, high settings, everything turned on. And we're looking here at an average of 317 frames per second, which is yeah, kind of mad. Minimums of 230.6, maximum recorded FPS 435.3, 1% lows of 127.9, and 0.1% lows over 60 FPS at 71.8. This game takes a little bit of tweaking actually to get the latency and all that kind of stuff set up right. I would probably cap this at around about maybe 165 frames per second, depending on your monitor. I think you don't really need those excessive frames per second to get a nice experience. It looks good, plays well, very enjoyable, but it's pretty easy to run, to be fair, even at 1440p high settings. Next, we're going to take a look at War Thunder. This again, 1440p, just using the default high preset. With this, lots of foliage, lots of different types of maps and things going on, so obviously your mileage may vary. But here we're looking at averages of 263.5 FPS, a minimum of 200.4, maximum of 362.6, 1% lows 104.5, and 0.1% lows of 34.5. So with this, I think there's definitely some headroom to increase the settings, maybe go for the cinematic preset, or perhaps crank it up to 4K. The choice with this is going to be down to you. And the last one in today's little group of tests, so this is Wreckfest, again another one of my favourites, although I don't really like when it's winter, because everything's just covered in snow, which I'm not sure if I like or not. It's interesting in terms of handling, but it does make the game a little bit more bland. You lose some of the textures and some of the scenery, but I guess that's winter for you. So with this 1440p, again on the high preset, we're looking at an average of 196.4 FPS, minimums of 138.8, maximums of 263, 1% lows of 136.2, and 0.1% lows of 76.7. So again, lots of options here. You could crank it up to Ultra and still get a very playable experience, or perhaps you could knock it up to 4K. You are going to be experiencing a little bit less there. You're probably going to be getting around 100 frames per second as an average, so it is going to have a pretty big effect. But depending on your monitor, depending on what you like playing and how much eye candy you want, the choice ultimately again is going to be down to you. With RTX 3060 Ti, the world is pretty much your oyster. So there we go, there is a look at the RTX 3060 Ti, one of the more popular releases I feel from Nvidia over the last few years. I really like this card. In fact, I've actually bought two of them from, I think it was scan.co.uk, both Founders Editions. I really do like it. It's got a very, very nice look to it. Again, fitting into that dual slot, using only 200 watts of power, and also not needing a ridiculous power supply to power it. I think it's a definite winner. The only downside for some people is that annoying 12 HP power. Yeah, it's love it or hate it. I think it is going to eventually be the default, but for a lot of people they would prefer to see just the 8-pin PCIe. One of those things where it is what it is, unfortunately, but I think it does look very sleek, very sexy, and I think Nvidia with the Founders Edition cards generally do a fantastic job, and especially now we've come away from those blower style cards of the 1080. They look nice, but they weren't the greatest for cooling. Anyway, I'm waffling on now. Overall, fantastic experience with the RTX 3060 Ti, and even now, 3 years on since its release, it's still crunching games very easily. 1440p, no problems whatsoever with pretty much any title. 4K, a possibility, but you are going to have to temper your expectations to somewhere between 60 and 100 FPS depending on the levels of eye candy. Having said that, I quite often do use it in 4K and actually put it down to low or medium, and it runs absolutely fine. But I think that's pretty much enough of my experiences of it. Let me know what you think about the Geforce RTX 3060 Ti in the comments section below. I think overall it's going to be a pretty positive experience for most of you, but let me know what you think. And are you considering even buying one now in 2024? I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts and your stories in that comment section below. But that's going to wrap this video up. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.